Hello again, everyone. These are the 2019 AP Micro FRQs Set 2, the set that everyone in the Pacific time zone took in 2019. Number 1, Gigantic Pharmaceutical Corporation has the patent on a prescription drug, making it the only manufacturer of that prescription drug. Gigantic is currently earning a positive economic profit. Part A, draw a correctly labeled graph for Gigantic and show each of the following: profit maximizing quantity, profit maximizing price, average total cost curve, and the area representing the consumer surplus shaded completely. So Gigantic is a monopoly because they said they had a patent. They're only manufacturer of this particular drug. So quantity on the x-axis, price on the y-axis, demand greater than marginal revenue, marginal cost intersecting ATC at the minimum of ATC. And so the profit maximizing quantity, QG, is at the quantity where MC intersects MR. You would go up to the demand curve to find the price, so that's PG. Average total cost curve, you got ATC. Consumer surplus is the area below the demand curve and above the price. So that purple shaded area represents consumer surplus. B1, suppose the demand for the prescription drug increases and Gigantic hires its warehouse workers in a perfectly competitive labor market. What will happen to Gigantic's demand for warehouse workers? Explain. So if the demand for the drug increases, remember the demand for labor or any other resource is derived from the demand for the underlying good. So if the demand for the drug increases, the demand for any resources, including workers, will also increase. So the price of the drug will increase, which will also lead to an increase in MRP, which will in turn lead to an increase in the demand for workers. So you can express it that way, or you can frame it in terms of derived demand. If MRP is higher, then MRP is now greater than MRC, and the firm can now hire more workers until MRC is equal to MRP. What will happen to the wage rate Gigantic pays its warehouse workers and the number of warehouse workers it hires? And the answer is the wage rate does not change because the labor supply curve is horizontal, and a shift in the demand for labor won't actually change the wage rate. So if you take a look at the graph that you did not have to include, there is the supply of labor, which is equal to MRC. There's the initial demand for labor. Because the demand for the drug increase, demand for labor is derived from the demand for the drug, which means it's going to increase. But notice the shifting demand of labor to the right doesn't change the wage rate because supply of labor is perfectly elastic. So there's no change in the wage. Now it does increase the number of workers hired, as you can see from the graph from QE to Q1, because of the increased demand for the drug. The graph was just so you can see what the answer is, but you didn't actually have to include it in your response. C1, after Gigantic's patent expires, another firm enters the prescription drug market and produces an identical drug that sells for a lower price. What will happen to Gigantic's producer surplus? And the answer is Gigantic's producer surplus will decrease because the demand for Gigantic's drug will decrease, which means the price will decrease. So if you imagine the firm's demand curve, Gigantic's demand curve will decrease because now there's a competitor. Since demand decreases, price of the good will decrease for Gigantic, which leads to a lower producer surplus. Remember, producer surplus is the area below the price above the supply curve. C2, what will happen to the consumer surplus in this prescription drug market? Explain. Now, overall, consumer surplus in the market will increase because the market price is going to decrease due to the presence of a competitor, and the market quantity will increase. So the market will become more efficient. That increases the amount of consumer surplus. It'll be able to buy more of the good at a lower price. Number 2, hats are produced in a perfectly competitive industry, and the government imposes a per unit sales tax on hats. A1, using the labeling from the graph, identify the after-tax price paid by consumers and the after-tax quantity. So you're going to basically look at the supply curve plus tax, and you're going to look at the demand curve. So you can see they intersect at point S, which corresponds with a price P3 and an after-tax quantity of Q2. Using labeling from the graph, identify the area representing the total tax revenue received by the government. So we established Q2 is going to be the new equilibrium quantity with the tax. The amount of the tax is the vertical distance between the two supply curves. This is represented by SZ. So this is the vertical distance. The total tax revenue is going to be the amount of the tax, which is the distance between XZ, in other words, P3 minus P1, and the area of the box. This quantity is Q2. So that shaded area represents the total tax revenue. P1, P3, SZ. Quantity times the amount of the tax. B, assume now instead that the demand for hats is perfectly inelastic at Q3 while supply and per unit tax remain unchanged. So inelastic demand means a vertical demand curve. So let's put that vertical demand curve at Q3 so you can see what it looks like. B1, will the after-tax price paid by consumers be higher, lower, or the same compared to the price in your answer in part A1? So the answer in part A1 was at price P3. Now you can see where the supply plus tax curve intersects the new demand curve is at point X. That corresponds to an equilibrium price of P4, which means the after-tax price is higher than it was in part A1. B2, will the total tax revenue received by the government be higher, lower, or the same compared to the tax revenue in your answer to part A2? Explain. So there is the area of the original tax. I just basically shifted it up a little bit so you can kind of see where it is. So it's basically the same area. So the total tax revenue is now higher, as the tax doesn't reduce the quantity demanded when demand is perfectly inelastic. So when demand is perfectly inelastic, that just tells you the people that need the good are still going to buy the good regardless of the price. So there is actually no change at all in the quantity demanded depending on the price. So the per unit tax is the same, but now the equilibrium quantity has increased from Q2 to Q3. So that green area is the increase in the total tax revenue. Again, you didn't have to graph this, but this allows you to see what the change in the tax revenue is. It's higher because the amount of the tax is the same and the quantity sold has increased due to the inelastic demand. Part C, if the demand for the hats remains perfectly inelastic at Q3 and the per unit sales tax is reduced, will producer's surplus increase, decrease, or stay the same? Explain. Now, in this case, producer's surplus remains the same because the total revenue of the firm, nor does the quantity demanded change. When demand is perfectly inelastic, consumers bear the full burden of the per unit tax. So if the per unit tax goes down, the quantity is the same. If the per unit tax went up, quantity is the same. But for the firm, total revenue is identical because if there were no tax, you would see that the price that the consumers would have to pay would be at P2. So the consumers are bearing the full brunt of the tax going from W to X. If the tax were, say, lower, total revenue for the firms is still P2 times Q3. Consumers just pay less tax. Number 3, Jackpot, Florist, and Boulevard Gardens share the market for floral bouquets in Tuliptown. Jackpot is deciding whether to close at 6 p.m. or to close at 9 p.m. And Boulevard is deciding whether to offer delivery or no delivery. The payoff matrix above shows the annual profits for each combination of actions that the firm can choose. The first entry shows Jackpot's profit, and the second entry shows Boulevard's profit. Assume that both firms know all the information in the matrix and act simultaneously and independently. Part A, is Jackpot's dominant strategy to close at 6 p.m., to close at 9 p.m., or does it not have a dominant strategy? So let's analyze this. If Boulevard chooses delivery, Jackpot will choose to close at 6 o'clock because 35 is greater than 25. If Boulevard chooses no delivery, Jackpot's going to close at 6 o'clock because 55 is greater than 45. So therefore, Jackpot's dominant strategy is to close at 6 p.m. Regardless of what strategy Boulevard chooses, Jackpot is better off closing at 6 p.m. B, suppose Jackpot chooses to close at 6 p.m. and Boulevard chooses no delivery. Is this the profit maximizing action by Boulevard? Using the payoff matrix, let's take a look. So it's not, because if Jackpot closes at 6 p.m., Boulevard can either choose delivery or no delivery. So if they choose no delivery, they're leaving $10 on the table. So they're better off choosing delivery because the $30 profit is more than the $20 profit if they choose no delivery. C, how much profit will Boulevard earn in the Nash equilibrium? So we established that Jackpot has a dominant strategy closing at 6. Boulevard is thus going to choose delivery because 30 is greater than 20. So this box represents the Nash equilibrium. Boulevard's profit will be 30 bucks. D, suppose these two firms merge to form one company with 2 locations and still face the same actions and payoffs. Which strategies would the new company choose to maximize its combined profit? So basically what you're looking for is the box that has the highest total profit of the 2 numbers combined. So that's going to be this box here. 85 bucks. Jackpot's going to close at 9 o'clock. Boulevard's going to choose no delivery. This sum of 85 is higher than any of the other 3 boxes. E, now assume that instead of merging, Jackpot proposes a plan to cooperate with Boulevard. Jackpot would agree to close at 9 p.m. and Boulevard would agree to no delivery. However, if either firm breaks the agreement, it must subtract $12 from its profit that is then added to the other firm's profit. E1, assuming the agreement was in effect and enforced, redraw the matrix including the player's actions and payoffs. So we're starting at the bottom box of 45 and 40 bucks. If either side cheats, 12 bucks goes to the other company. So if Jackpot cheats, in other words, they decide to close at 6 o'clock, their profit would go from 55 to 43 in this box, and Boulevard's profit would go from 20 to 32. Now, what if Boulevard cheats? What if Boulevard chooses delivery instead? Now we're looking at this box. So delivery is going to lead to a decrease in Boulevard's profit from 50 to 35, and 12 bucks will go from Boulevard to Jackpot, increasing Jackpot's profit to 37 bucks. So here is the complete redrawn matrix with the new numbers put in. E2, assuming Boulevard is a profit-maximizing firm and there are no antitrust concerns, would Boulevard agree to Jackpot's proposal? Explain using specific values from the redrawn payoff matrix. So the question is this something that Boulevard would do? Are they better off? So under the proposal, if Jackpot closes at 6, Boulevard is going to choose no delivery because 32 is greater than 30. On the other hand, if Jackpot closes at 9, Boulevard's still going to choose no delivery because 40 is greater than 38. So in the new Nash equilibrium, Boulevard's profit is 40 bucks because Boulevard has now a dominant strategy of no delivery. If Boulevard chooses no delivery, Jackpot is going to choose to close at 9 o'clock. So in the new Nash equilibrium, Boulevard's profit is 40 bucks. So Boulevard would agree to the proposal because under the old Nash equilibrium, they were only going to get $30 of profit, but with a new one, they're going to get $40 of profit. That's it for the 2019 Set 2 micro questions. If you have any questions, ask me anytime.